Hey everyone, welcome to Stranger Conversations. Here we share stories about the unlikely paths to career and to life. I'm Sean, and my co-host is Yoshang. And today,
Everyone, oops.
I'm so glad to have Kaixing and Heng Xuan from A Handful of Leaves here together with us. And Handful of Leaves, the goal of it is really to share practical Buddhist knowledge to help people navigate the complexities of life to be happier. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So succeed.
And I love the zenness you brought to that.
Well, I used to teach a bit of yoga, so I do have that yoga voice that's been honed a little bit over time. So I think to start off, right, could maybe one of you share with us, a little bit more about why Handful of Leaves?
All right. So yeah, that's a good question. And we sometimes also get asked that question, why handful of leaves? So it's actually based on a sutta called the Simsapa Sutta that the Buddha taught. And for those of you not familiar with what suttas are, it's kind of like the compiled teachings of the Buddha's 30 over years of teachings. So in this sutta, in this teaching, the Buddha went in the forest and he asked the monks, which one has more leaves, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? And it's not a trick question here, because the answer was the leaves in the forest are way more than the leaves in my hand. But what the Buddha was trying to get to is that the leaves in his hands is what is essential for a happier life, for wisdom, for peace to take place in people's life. There are many things in this world, but the things in the handful are what is essential. And that tied into our vision, which is, in this whole world of social media, what is essential? What is essential for happiness? Yeah. So I think that was this is the background of handful of leaves.
Yeah, and perhaps to add on to the story, like why we started, I guess there's really a gap in terms of the space, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure when both of you first think of Buddhism, you're just like, yeah. But when I first was brought to a Buddhist center, I was like, is it in Chinese? Can I understand? I would have never thought there would be a English group in Singapore. And so that, I think language is one, and the other one is a lot of misperception. And I think in today's day and age, mental well-being is so important. A lot of people are trying to seek for help, but might not know where to. And personally, I find that the Buddhist teaching is so timeless. And then comes another gap, because there are so many Buddhist talks out there by monastic members, by really good Buddhist teachers. But sometimes the topic, it's quite broad-based. So we can talk about compassion in turbulent time, or mindfulness and meditation. However, it's not really contextual, where you get to hear personal stories and struggles. And I think what we are really trying to achieve is to say, it's okay to be vulnerable. And it's okay if you are kind of failing in the process. And then we capture those stories to inspire people to say that, hey, it's really a journey, and to shift perspectives so that they don't feel like they're so lonely, whether it's work, whether it's a relationship, or whether it's just a spiritual path. Yeah, so that's the kind of reason why we started, because we feel like there's a need to connect through stories and to make the wisdom so much more accessible and practical today to day.
You talk about making people feel a bit less lonely. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, everyone operates at a very different level. Some people, they would actively seek support and they would join communities. And perhaps through the social circle, they feel that they are not alone. But there are times where people might struggle with something very personal, and they might not know that someone else is going through the same thing. So if they were to chance upon a story online to say, oh, dealing with a death of a loved one, and how do you grieve over it? It's a topic that it's not usually talked about, because I mean, it's so morbid, right? Like, you don't go to your social gathering like Chinese New Year, then talk about grieving. So it's having that space. So that, oh, I'm not alone, because that person is like me. We're walking on the same journey.
guess it's so important, right, to have someone walking on the same journey who gets you, you know. And I guess it's more than just getting you, right? There is some interaction or some sort of connection, that is so important. Yeah. Do you have any examples or any stories of such things happening?
Yeah, so great question there. So the idea of helping other people who might seem lonely where they are. One of our followers who we do not know actually reached out to us for one of the stories that we talked about. 3 lessons that the person learned from passing away, like from a loved one passing away. And that person reached out to us that his mom actually passed away 7 weeks ago, and he felt a lot of pain, and he had no idea where to go. And by reading that article, he felt like at ease because he could identify with all the different stages that the person goes through. So that for him, we don't even know this person, and he kind of just like reached out and just thanked us for just making him feel less alone in this journey of death and dying. Yeah, so that's just one story I could think of my head. Yeah.
I'm so glad that right off the bat, right, we are already talking about, or we have already come to the theme, right, of today's discussion. When we posted on Instagram, what we said was an unlikely path, doesn't have to be a lonely path. And I think maybe many people who are walking an unlikely path, doing something that is a little bit different, may find it a bit hard to find that sort of person to connect with, to resonate, with. So let me turn the question on to you, right? To Kai-Sing, to Heng Xuan, right? Like, personally, who have you met on this unlikely path that you're walking right now that maybe made a little bit of difference to you?
I'll take that question. It's quite recent, actually. So I got connected with one of our writers, and because she's also running a podcast or launching a podcast, and I was trying to get some advice. There was something that I learned from her, and it can be summed up in, it shouldn't be a performance. So I felt like that was so simple and profound because, especially in this spiritual journey, we really want to show our authentic self. And sometimes when we come off as too prepared, too structured, it can lose the whole essence of why we have started out in the first place, because it's very, I'm a very hard person, right? So it's very heart-based, and you're really trying to touch lives. And that's something that you can't quite replace with intellect to a certain degree. Yeah, so that's someone I've met, and then something I've learned.
I think for me, it's also actually one of our writers, and this writer is someone I've never met, before, and she was just like giving me some directions on topics that we could touch on. And I think why that stood out for me is because it's someone that you have never met, but that person aligns with you kind of like spiritually and in their journey, and they're just giving you like open, very raw feedback that of how things can get better, and they're just building this whole thing with you. And it's really just unlikely, because why in the world would a stranger or a contributor be so vested in it? And then you realize that at one point you have built a community of people that wants to make Handful of Leaves even better and wants to give even more stories. So I think for me, that's the interesting part.
So I'm really curious, right, about how orchestrated or how planned out was it? So I mean, Kai-Sing was saying that, if it's too planned, then it kind of loses that authenticity. But when we look for people, or we kind of bump or rub shoulders with people on this unlikely path, to what extent, right, is it about chance or choice, right? And So before Kai-Sing or Heng-Xuan answer this question, so it's kind of a game, right? So you have to choose one or the other, even though probably it's about both, and you have to justify why you think it's chance or choice. And after that, since we have got so many folks in the room, would love to hear any reactions or responses, from the rest. So it's a bit of like an audience question as well.
We have to choose chance or choice.
Yes, choose chance or choice and then say why you think it's chance or choice. Or maybe
Can't choose
illustrate it
both.
with a story.
So tough. Should I go first? I'll go first. I would say it's actually a choice. And I think in the process of doing anything, it's about being purposeful, right? And being purposeful is a choice on its own. However, disclaimer, it doesn't mean that we have to be so rigid and shoebox ourselves and everything that comes along the way according to our plan, because then we are not letting opportunities surface. And it's a choice to then look at those opportunities that we didn't know would surface and then decide whether to act on it or not act on it. But there should be a North Star, and that process is a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that it's a choice as well. In terms of meeting the right people, like yes, there's chance, but like you decide whether you want to take on their advice or you want to, ask deeper questions, or you can just say thank you, and then that's it. So I think that's a choice of like selecting what you feel is useful, and sometimes it just takes a bit of luck. In maybe you said no to an idea today and you realize that that's the best idea, and then 5 years later you're like, oh wow, I completely missed that. Yeah, so but I will be inclined to the word choice in the way that we meet people on our path.
So for me, right, maybe let me try to justify if chance can be a good answer. I found that for much of my life, there's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't know. And most of the choices I make appear to be, taking me back to the same path, to the same things over and over again. So instead of looking in where I know, why not look in where I don't know, or where I don't know I don't know? So there's an element of wondering. There's an element of just seeing what happens, going with the flow, saying yes to something that you never said yes to before, and see what happens. I think to a certain extent, meeting Yoshan and the rest of the Stranger Conversation folks was a bit like that. I found that the harder I tried to choose, the slower I was. So that's my perspective. So
wouldn't it be a choice also for you to let things be as they are?
It's only that small little thing, right? It's only that kind of like relaxation. I wouldn't call it a choice. It's more like stop being so uptight. Just let go. Yeah. It's not like, do you choose like chocolate or vanilla? No, it's not like that. It's just open up and whatever flavors come, you just try.
I think for me, it would definitely be choice though. Like chance is more like what Sean mentioned, right? About how we started this stranger conversation. For me, it definitely came with a bit of like, I would say by chance, because my friend told me about this, then I watched their podcast and I thought it was very interesting, and then some stuff happened along the way. So, but we will reach a point where you have to make a decision, and that's like the choice, like whether you want to commit to this or you have other priorities and things like that, right? So, yeah, I would say both comes hand in hand. Without chance, you may not really have the decision, which is the choice that you have to make. But sometimes eventually I think choice still comes in along the way, because if you choose to do something, then you're going like seek for it, right? Then chances and other stuff will come along. So yeah, that's just my take. Yeah.
Nice, thanks. So for the benefit of the other folks in the audience who may want to share, the question was, when finding people to connect with, to meet on this unlikely path, is it a matter of chance or more a matter of choice? And the way to answer this is to choose one or the other, and maybe illustrate that with a story or something from your life. Did anyone want to share? No, it's okay.
You could type it in the chat if you
Yes.
guys are more comfortable with that.
Let's see.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. So just keep that in mind, and we can keep going. So I think for the journey of a handful of leaves, probably one of the most important meetings on this unlikely path was Kaixuan and Kaixing and Hengxuan.
There's a good merge of names.
Like you put like the two smaller robots together, and you get like the mega one. It's more powerful than ever. Yes, so tell us a bit about how that happened, right? How much chance was there? How much choice was there? Take us back to that time.
Yeah, so I think it was chance. I think for that was chance, but I think subsequently was the choice, right? So I think we started the conversation. We met in poly, or high school for those of you who are not familiar with poly, and over there we met during our orientation camp, and then started talking about like vegetarianism, right? And topics got a bit deeper into like meditation, and then after that we veered closer towards like what is Buddhism and all of that. So I think like while there was a bit of a conscious decision to say, oh, okay, this is Buddhism, and not like jump into another topic, where's the good place to go shopping? So like you keep the conversation towards like something that's quite, you want to deepen that conversation. And after that, then that's where our paths like took off. That's where we went to I brought her to a youth group called Buddhist Fellowship Youth. And then after that, we did many projects there. And we launched like a random like t-shirt company that, just raised funds for charity. It was really fun. And then, yeah, we did other many projects together. And yeah, this is our latest project together over the past, I think, 10 years. Yeah, so this is one of the projects. Yeah. So that's a path of chance and then choice taking everything along the way.
I see. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you ended up bringing her to that Buddhist session?
My memory is very sketchy, but I think Kaixing will remember best, because that for her is probably like quite significant.
Yeah, it is. I always say Heng Shen is my 贵人. I never know how to replay him. It's like the best gift in life, right? It's yeah, I think it's just to bring people on the spiritual path. I remember it was so Shen always has this thing where he look at a person, it's like, I think this person can benefit. And so he said, hey, there's the weekend retreat at the Buddhist center. Do you want to join? And I think I said I can only join for a day or something. Maybe it was over 2 days. And the first question I asked was, yeah, is it in English? Because it is Chinese, I don't want. Yeah, and then I went to this building. It's actually situated at Yo's building, Buddhist Fellowship. To be honest, as a beginner, it looks quite dodgy. I was like, is this like a factory, Yo's? And I went in, I was pleasantly surprised. It was so peaceful. And that's how I started my meditation journey and also my path on Buddhism, right? So yeah, the experience was just so great, like the meditation. And I really want to find out more. And then he was like, oh, there's youth service. Do you want to come along? And I was like, sure. And it's just never ending. Yeah, just like, satisfying my my curiosity that I have since young, and questions answered that my parents wouldn't be able to answer in that way according to the scriptures. And ever since I learned the scripture, it's just like no turning back. I was just like, wow, the Buddha is a genius, my life is just transformed. So that's how I started. So I'm immensely thankful.
What do you think it was that Heng Xuan saw in you? So either of you can respond, right? Like you said that Heng Xuan has this gift or this knack of like, seeing like what someone needs. Like, is it in the face, your face reading or something?
No, I wish I had that skill set. I think it's just like when you talk to someone, then they ask deeper questions. They ask deeper questions about life, and they are like willing to like go a bit more existential. Because I think in poly, like we just want to see like, oh, what's a nice CCA to join, who's dating who, all of that, like very superficial stuff. And back then I think there was no like K-drama. So like I think actually there was, but like not very like popular. But we used to talk a lot about like different things, or like J-Cho or whatever. So like when you talk to someone on a deeper level, then you realize that they can connect, and that's where you say, hey, maybe you want to take this further and deeper, and yeah, then you invite them. Yeah, so I think it's more of like always seeing whether there's interest, and very very rare that you would say, oh, you're feeling sad, come join me, that kind of thing. It's usually more of like the person must be willing to inquire deeper, and then that's how you pick, not from the face. Yeah.
So do you have a certain line or certain feelers that you use, right, on anybody that you meet?
Certain feelers. Not really. Like nowadays, I think I just post on Instagram, my own Instagram, like if I like have a meditation thing coming up, then anyone can join. Because I think at the end of the day, um the I think the Buddhist tradition is less about like converting people from non-Buddhist to Buddhist, but rather converting people from sadness to happiness, from darkness to brightness. And it doesn't mean that they need to label or identify as Buddhist. Yeah, so I think that for us is like the main thing. It's like transformation from dark to light, making a person happier, and that's it. Yeah. So no filler lines lah, no sales pitch. Yeah.
I mean, Kai Sing, as Heng Xuan was talking about that first meeting, does that jog in your mind, in your memory? Like what are the questions that you may have asked him, the things that may have transpired on that day itself?
I can't really remember exactly, but what is more deeply imprinted in my mind is I used to think that vegetarianism is a very stupid thing. I'm on vegetarian diet, by the way, so no offense to vegetarians, but I just couldn't put two together. Like, why you? I mean, now I sound silly, but just like, why are you a vegetarian but you want to save the planet when you're eating the greens? It's so stupid of me to think like that. And then he had to do the intellectual thing to talk about the energy consumed and the land, etc. So it actually started from that topic. So I can't remember other, I think, spiritual topic. Maybe there was things about misconceptions of meditation and how to get started. And maybe he was like, oh, this person interested in meditation, let me introduce retreat. Yeah.
And do you recall how it was like to agree, or like when you were when he proposed, right, to like why not come to this Buddhist retreat and check it out? Do you remember how you thought about it back then? At that moment, was it like yes, or like
no, definitely not, definitely not. Like willing to give it, willing to explore, but I wasn't really sure like what I was getting into also. Yeah, I can't exactly remember the emotion.
Yeah, so sounds like it's kind of like an interplay, a dance between two folks, right? Someone recognizes that maybe someone else, may have questions or may have a need to know more. And then the other person also responds in kind and says, okay, my mind is open, let me try. maybe that's kind of like the dance that happens with many folks on these unlikely paths. Maybe it's really about, I'm trying to go somewhere with this, right? Like maybe it's about a shared sense of discovery, a shared sense of exploration or investigation. Yeah. So tell me about how the two of you then decided to do things together, to work together. You said you created t-shirts, right? Which I think is a pretty fun project.
Yeah, so I think what drove us to like collaborate more is also, first of all, we were first in the same polytechnic, so I think that was much easier to like meet each other, just discuss different things, and then on the weekends we would go to the youth center together. Then we decided like, hey, how do we make it's always about making Buddhism more accessible, and one of that was like, hey, why not do t-shirts? Like why not try to embed like Buddhist principles into the clothes that we wear? And so that's one of the different areas that we collaborated on. Yeah.
Were there any slogans or Buddhist sayings that you remember putting on the t-shirts?
Yeah. I think one of them is my favorite one, is like a vintage kind of design. And it was like meditation. The last time a lot of brands had to put like established like 1935.
Yep,
and
yep.
then we put like meditation, best medicine for the mind, established 2,600 years ago. Yeah. So like, and then it's like the Buddha or like a Buddhist monk like sitting there meditating. So it's like a kind of a play on like the modern commercialism, like commercial consumerism, and kind of just taking it back to like the real medicine for the mind. Yeah. So that's one design that stood out for me. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And so during these first few times when you all were working together, did you all find that there was more of a instant connection, or were there things that you had to work through? Were there little points of disagreement that came about?
I'm not so sure whether it's instant connection, but I guess both of us, we have a lot of synergy because we also think quite differently, and we appreciate people challenging our ideas in order to grow and to think beyond. So I wouldn't consider that as challenges, but it was more of like, oh, let's have a healthy debate. And that's where the conversations become a lot richer. Yeah, and that's still something that I appreciate about Shen. I mean, we would just, every week we'll discuss and then we'll have new perspectives.
Have those debates like intensified or stayed the same or reduced in intensity as time goes by?
I think for us it has relatively stayed the same, and I think now we also trust in the fact that we don't. Yeah, I don't think I ever got offended by Kai Xing, like whatever she say. So I don't think it's intensified to the point of like, hey, why you say that? I think it's also the Buddhist act of not taking yourself so seriously. Like, because everything is just like conditions, right? Then, if you identify with a certain identity, that's where you suffer. So if you take like positions that I'm this person, then forever you'll always be arguing over like your identity rather than principles and values. Yeah. So I think over the years, I think we got more skillful in asking each other questions, but at the same time, we also got more comfortable being very direct. Like, I don't think this idea will work. Yeah, that kind of approach. Yeah. Kai Xing, any differing thoughts? Any challenges?
Yes, I would like to challenge that. No, I concur.
I think it's a blessing, it's a privilege, right, to have someone that you find a good fit with, to walk together on an unlikely path. I think many folks may not have that same, that same good fortune to do so. But so like, I think it'd be really interesting, and I'm really curious, right, about how you guys like work things out, or maybe you could take us back to the time when maybe you're a bit less skillful about challenging each other, and just share with us, some stories or some incidents from those times.
Having a little bit of difficulty thinking of less skillful because I kind of associate that with arguments and we've
Yes.
never had any.
Mhm.
I would say perhaps it's a tension, right, in terms of how we think. So we had this conversation before about Shen being he's very data driven and he's very structured. But for me, I follow a lot. I kind of use my intuition as a guide. Of course, not 100%, but I would know if something isn't right. It's just this nagging feeling, and I would tend to trust it. And sometimes I also would see that just looking at the numbers itself wouldn't tell us the full story because it's also how we interpret the numbers. So we're still having this constant conversation about to what extent do we use numbers to guide us, and to what extent do we use just our trust and our vision.
Can you say more about that, right? Like when you say trust and vision, are you saying like no data? What do you mean? No numbers?
I would say first have the direction, the kind of path that you want to chart, and then collect data along the way, but don't let that hinder the journey. So it's like going back to the chance thing, right? You want to take the chance to just explore. And if you know that you're solving a problem worth solving, then naturally things will work out. And it's just a matter of how long, how short, how patient we are. And then we use the data to validate without being too restricted by it, I would say. Because sometimes we might give up too soon without knowing.
It sounds like Heng Xuan probably had a slightly different point of view.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing that we discuss every week when we meet to talk about handful of leaves. Like I like to use data because in my work, and like I did consulting, and now I'm like also helping like startups grow. So like for me, it's like I know what metrics to use for, because these are the metrics that investors look at. But I think like translating that into like Dharma work, yeah, it makes you like wonder whether you're too impatient to grow, or you are like blindsided by your vision, and then you are just like the numbers are dropping, no one's reading your material, but you're like, okay, this is great. So I think that's always that healthy tension. And I always like say to Kai Sing, oh, this metric is dropping, like what do we do? Or there's not a lot of take rate on this, what do we do? And yeah, so we kind of balance each other out in terms of, she's like, oh, don't worry because we're trying ABC, and for me it's like quantitatively it doesn't make sense. But I think this is where there is this principle called disagree and commit. So like that's where we disagree on certain things, but we commit to it in the end, because we trust the other person that they know what they're doing. And that's where where you avoid arguments, because you have their principles in mind, you believe that person has the best interest. But right now, you suspend your judgment that you are always correct, because that's where groups fall apart, when people think that they're always correct and they know everything. So disagree and commit, I think, has helped us a lot on this like handful of leaves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Have you softened on your dedication to data in any way thanks to Kai Sing?
Yeah, I think definitely. Otherwise, like our meetings would just be Excel spreadsheets. So I think there's like way more than Excel spreadsheets. Even though that's one thing that I looked at, but I don't feel like anxiety to take action. I think that's one thing that the corporate world takes a lot, bias for action right now. But sometimes it's actually just about waiting and seeing what's happening out there. Yeah. So yes, definitely soften, and I think just become more patient, like with the growth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps, do you have a take, right? Like, so how do you feel about what Kai Sing says about vision and trusting the process, maybe waiting it out and being patient?
Yeah, I think there's some merit to it because, you know, when we first started, it's pretty much different in terms of the product that we are doing, right? It just keeps iterating. So I think trusting the process that we will make the best decision whenever we need to pivot, and that brings about like confidence in the process that you're able to take whatever that comes. So I think definitely softening that that approach and becoming more patient with
Right.
ourselves also.
Right. Maybe let me ask more specifically, right? Like, so let's say the numbers don't really show it, and then Kai-Sing says, let's have faith. So
Yeah.
what's going on through your mind at the time?
I think the first thing I'll be like, oh my god, do you see the graph? Yeah, like that will be my first reaction, right? Like, don't you see the graph? Then I will like share screen and show it is the graph. But then after that, like when Kai says why, I think the why is really important, right? Like she might say, oh, we are launching a new podcast, so we are not going to focus that much on driving like 3 articles a week or something like that. Then I'll be like, oh, okay. And she just says like, you have to trust that, you know, when I launch this podcast, you know, more users will be, the more higher user retention and all of that. Then I'll be like, oh, okay, chill, yeah. So I think that's like kind of like I'll be like, oh no, look at this, look at the graph, you know, how can you say that? And then after that, like, you know, it will just like dip into like, oh, okay, I understand. Yeah. So I think that for me is how it plays out in my mind. Yeah.
Kai-Sing, right? Like as Heng was talking, you know, I noticed he used this sound a couple of times. uh, how does that make you feel?
Okay. I just want to make a disclaimer. It's not that I don't use data at all, but he mentioned the keyword, which is why. And it can go both ways, right? Because sometimes we might see the graph and say, hey, you know, it's tracking pretty well. And like, is it a vanity metric? You know, the number of unique views, page count, and how many followers we have. How does that lead to our original purpose in helping us to fulfill that? Is it really an indication that we're touching lives, or are we looking at something that's more qualitative? And it's not so much of like, oh, just trust in the process and don't go with the data. But of course, if the data is telling you that you're failing, then you have to accept that you have to pivot. So I think it's more of trusting that you're solving a problem we're solving, and then let things flow, observe, but don't be blindsided by the numbers. So rather than not being blindsided by the vision, it can be other way. So it's like a balance. Yeah.
Yep, certainly, right? Like this whole dance between data and the why, you know, it is very close to my heart, right? Because I'm in design and innovation, and I like to tell people that, you know, the future hasn't happened yet. So it's hard to measure it before it happens. You know, you can always use all sorts of proxies and all sorts of, you know, rules of thumb, guidelines, you know, but at the end of the day, it's the future and you need to let it happen. And you need patience, right? You need a certain sense of craft to kind of like whip together this recipe. And then once it's a good recipe, you know, then people will kind of like come and patronize your restaurant. But back again to that interaction or dance, right, between not just data and intuition, but yes, it is, right, between like, you know, Kai-Sing and Heng, you know, like how do you try to maybe put Heng more at ease?
How do I put him more at ease? I guess because
Yeah.
he's a very structured person, and people feel uncomfortable with uncertainty. So having a vivid plan, to me, I feel it's really important rather than just like, oh, I have this idea, I have that idea, and then it all boils down to execution, right? And I'm just like throwing ideas at him and then seeing what sticks. Then he was like, but how can I be assured? So planning, listing that like the milestones and what are the measurement of success down, I think helps both of us and our other co-founder as well, Dita, to say, okay, I think we're on the right track. These are certain signposts to show that we are on the right track.
All right, cool. So I'd like to open this up for questions, you know, like Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask Kai-Sin or Xuan?
Jared has a question. I think he raised
Hello.
his hand.
Hold on, let
Yeah.
me put on the video so it's so weird. Hi, my name is Jared. I wanted to, can I like share a little bit and then ask a question? Is that okay?
Of course.
I really love what you guys are doing. So my parents, so I grew up not Buddhist, right? My parents were agnostic, atheists for all my life. And then after they retired, this is like 10 years ago, they somehow fell into Buddhism. And it's been really amazing. I think seeing them use it as a way to kind of keep active in their kind of retirement kind of years. And it's brought them a lot of happiness and so on. A lot of friends, a lot of people to walk with in their kind of senior years. But also, I think it's given us a lot to talk about. So I'm trained as a philosopher, right? And Buddhism because I think they have a particularly kind of philosophical strand of Buddhism going on, where they kind of really kind of read the scriptures and debate it and talk about it. And I see a lot of parents with their kind of adult children have very little to talk about, right? They follow the old patterns of just treating each other like parent and small child, and it's not healthy. But I think that the fact that my parents have done this, and it's given us kind of rich source of like discussion and talking about like this disagreement, but kind of good disagreement, and it's been very valuable for our family, right? To have something to talk about, and then I visit them, and now they're caretakers for like small meditation center in Potong Pasir, right? Which they set up, and then they have friends there, and it's just been glorious for their thing. So it's been a great source of happiness for us. So I wanted to share that, and I'm glad that you guys are doing something. I think what they're doing is targeted at more the auntie, uncle age, I think, than the younger people. But it's great that it looks like there's a bit of parallel with what you're doing. Okay, so that's my sharing. I have a question. Maybe I'm a civil servant, right? So maybe this is coming a little bit from the kind of state perspective. I apologize. Happiness is great, right? And Buddhism does bring, I think, people kind of contentment and happiness, a certain kind of a lack of grasping, right, and materialism with the way they live their lives. One might think that is not the best way to have a country, right? That one might want a particular kind of anti-Buddhist view, right? One wants to be hungry and ambitious. One wants citizenry that fight for the security of the nation, the economy of the nation, the right nation to exist in a global world that is, right, violent and unfriendly, right? So there is that particular aspect of it. I'm curious how you think Buddhism fits into the kind of modern context of like Singapore and kind of modern life.
I can take this question. In fact, our very first episode of the podcast talks about the balance between ambition and contentment. And because I recently just graduated from the diploma in Buddhism, and we actually have this whole topic on social dimension, economics, and Buddhism. And then also I was reminded of a talk given by a Buddhist brother. He was asking about what is the currency of life? Right? Is it really about the money that we make, or is it something more? It's not to discount that material wealth and success is important, but it's to what extent. There's what we call the hedonic cycle, right? And I think in terms of Singapore, we're trying to grow, and we're trying to be, staying afloat and survive and to flourish. But if you take a look at, in my perspective, if you take a look at all of the countries in the world, we have the underdeveloped, the developing, and the developed. At some point in life, all the undeveloped countries would match up to where we are today. Then it's kind of like, where does it end? And then once we hit a certain point, we have to think more. What is it that we're chasing? We have all this success, but am I happy? If I die today, will I die without regrets and without remorse? So I think it's really a fine balance to first take care of our material well-being, but do it in a joyful way and in a wholesome way that doesn't really compromise on other people's happiness. And then when you're enjoying your wealth also, you don't feel guilty about it. So then you have both, right? Material wealth as well as spiritual wealth. No, not sure, Xuan, you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, so I think Jared, that was a great question. So I would take a different, slightly like different angle on this. I think Singaporeans recently were voted the second most overworked people in the world, and I think that if we use Buddhism, where does Buddhism fit into this? Is the idea of creating mental boundaries. That's number one. It allows you to say when do you let go of work, and I think that's such an important question, especially work from home. When do we let go of work? And then number two, where Buddhist principles come into play is not to be grasping too much to ego, especially if you are so-called, in public service leading a country. Where do you know when to let go of ideas that don't go your way? Because not always what you're happy with is actually good for the nation. So I think that's number two. And then number three is about how do we grow mental well-being? Because right now you reach a pinnacle of material needs and all of that, right? Once you settle that, what's next? It's actually the mental wellness. And that's why there's such an increase in like awareness, which is great in the need for mental well-being. So Buddhism comes in really well because talk about disassociation with identity, right? You don't identify with what people throw at you, and that creates a happier population, and that creates a happier society. So I think these are like the 3 points for me that of how Buddhism can play in Singapore. Yeah,
I love these answers. Thank you very much. I think they very much resonate with my personal kind of inclination, and it's I think good to hear them articulated. I wonder if the kind of modern anti-work, 躺平, kind of great resignation sort of movement, right? Maybe it's a growing awareness that mental health, life is more than just a bit of kind of growth or work ambition, right? But I think I had to check out your podcast, it sounds like.
Can I answer that question too? No, Jared.
No, please do. I am curious what you think, Sean.
So there's this idea of the Bodhisattva, right? In Buddhism, which is someone who has attained enlightenment, is fully awakened, but has chosen to enter or like re-enter, mundane life, right? Because he wants to make a difference. So where I'm going with this is that it's kind of in line with what my answer just now as well, about how like maybe being able to progress on this unlikely path is really just about letting go, really just about, kind of like dissolving the ego, dissolving the anxiety, dissolving the fear of failure, the fear of like, what if people ridicule me, what if people think that what I'm doing is stupid? And once all of that is gone, then what's left is probably what you just really want to do, if there is still a you left. And I guess, I think that if you walk the Buddha's path, it doesn't mean you have to end up in a forest or a cave or a monastery. Actually, you can still be in the worldly world, right? And you can still influence freely now without too much hang-ups or boundaries. So that's my take, right? So a happy nation is also actually a fulfilled and a productive nation in some ways. That's my take. We have a question from Susanna. What are the future and actionable goals of a handful of leaves?
I have a short answer, which is to touch more lives. Sounds a bit cliche, but Shen will elaborate on that.
I think the future goals for handful of leaves is not something that is measured in metric. Like, ironic, right, coming from me. But I think it's really becoming a platform, a media platform, like where people can listen, watch, read. Just like imagine like a kind of like a peaceful space that exists in the online sphere, where ordinary people can share extraordinary wisdom. So to me, the future state is just kind of building that up, whereby when you type into our search bar, you're able to find what you need, and to feel belong, and to also know where in the real world one can go to find greater peace. So I think it is very qualitative, interestingly, but for me that's where it is, because the moment you define a so-called number, like a metric, and then once you reach there, then you find it that you have been chasing this number so long, and you find emptiness after that. Yeah. But good question.
Nice. From Nicole, asking for a friend. Do you have any tips for a young person who is going through a hard time in terms of mental wellness?
I would say it's actually a very simple but tricky question, because now we don't understand the context of your friend, right? So take it with a pinch of salt. It might just be a blanket solution. I would say first it's assess the severity of the the situation. Are there signs of the person being depressed? If that's the case, should a person seek professional and medical support? And then when the person has capacity, then perhaps you can guide him or her to resources that would make him or her feel less lonely, and very structured frameworks to think about certain situations, to not be in the cycle, the mental cycle that can kind of spiral downwards. I know in the space, a lot of people are quick to suggest mindfulness and meditation as a way to kind of curb certain emotions. It's just like, oh, let it be. But it can actually go into the bucket of either toxic positivity or a spiritual bypass. So we also want to look out for the signs. When we are saying, let it go, it's all impermanent, to kind of numb the pain and avoid the situation. And when we have the capacity to truly face it, and do we have the right tools to face it? So I think these are considerations and not really a solution. So Nicole, as a friend, perhaps you're best to judge which is best. She might have more things to say about this.
Yeah, I think Nicole, that's really, really, courageous of you to ask on behalf of your friends, because sometimes the thing is acknowledging that we don't know what to do. And that's the first step to, self-understanding. I think just 2 points to add on to Kai-Sing, beyond what she just said about like knowing whether, is medical intervention needed and all of that and support. I think there are a few things that we should also check for ourselves, is whether we are coming from a point of view of that we want to so-called fix a person. So there's also sometimes a healthy way to check, like, what's our intention here? Is it a compassion? Is it a point of view of like, oh, we pity this person, then we help? Then once we check the intention, we know what we're doing, then we can let go of anything that comes our way. Meaning if the person say, I don't need your help, I don't want to talk to you, then you won't take it personally. You just say like, okay, maybe that's space that they need. And I think number two, so-called advice from my point of view from this question, obviously not knowing the full context, is that I think just being there with someone, like, we are so disconnected from nature. We are so disconnected from, just being in motion. So being with friends, being with them to just walk in nature without your phones, without checking notifications, sometimes that can actually provide a lot of perspective. Let them find their own answers. And you'll be surprised how much they can grow and how much they feel empowered to make better decisions. So more actionable, I mean, because I'm a bit more actionable person. So like being with them in nature, just going to have a coffee with them. Or number 3 is actually exercising with them, brisk walking or doing things that they love. Like even pottery as well can really bring a lot of mindfulness into that space. So yeah, that's just like my few solutions I can give. Hopefully that's helpful, Nico. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I can resonate with that a lot as well. Like the more disconnected, the less involvement that we have in the immediate environment, the things that we're doing, the people that we are with, the less, at least for me, the less happy I become. The more time I spend like on YouTube surfing, it just makes me unhappy, even though I keep doing it, right? So very good advice. Yoshan, did you have a question that I didn't cover?
Yeah, it was quite some time back. Okay, I guess the question was like when we were talking about how, the balance between intuition and data. So I was just curious if there's any feature on currently live or not live on Handful of Leaves that actually went through that kind of discussion between both of you. And how do you find the balance between using data or intuition? Yeah. Or maybe like, for example, the podcast that you guys are coming up with right now, like what made you guys want to, do the podcast?
There are a few parts to it. I would say first, it stems from my own personal interest. It was actually my idea at the very beginning. I was like, what is the format that I would personally prefer to learn? And because I binge listen to podcasts, right? It's like the best thing where you can do your dishes and cooking. I mean, just so many upsides. So it started from that interest and then seeing how it can be applied. In terms of why we started, I guess we're trying out different formats, and one of the features we've tried is actually videos as well. So you have like an hour or 2 hour long kind of talks, and it's a very high barrier to entry. It's like, how would you send that to a friend in need, right? So we cut it into snippets, bite-sized video of about 3 to 5 minutes with some, footages and some nice music, and we were experimenting with that. I think it was good to see that people were watching. We had subscribers and people were giving feedback to say that it resonated. However, it wasn't very scalable, which is why we pivoted into podcasts, because would it be also easier rather than to get people to write, to get them to talk, because some people prefer that format, and then we edit. So I would say at this point, we are experimenting and then just seeing how much data we can collect to, take place, like what Sean mentioned, right? We can't have data for what we are charting for the future. So we just have to find that fine balance.
Right. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the podcast. And also, like, there's a question on YouTube actually. I'll just repeat the question. So, like, Grace is wondering and curious about the story behind Handful of Leaves. I think you guys shared earlier in the chat, but maybe folks have like joined in halfway through. They are interested to find out the meaning behind Handful of Leaves.
Sure. Thanks so much for asking that question, Grace. It's based on a sutta, Teachings of the Buddha, and the Buddha brings the monks in the forest and he asks a trick question that I thought was a trick question when I actually first read it. He took up leaves from his hand. The simsapa is a tree that you can Google. It's like, and he put the leaves in his hand and asked the monks, of all the which one is more, the leaves in my hand or leaves in the forest? And then the monks were like, okay, is this a trick question? No. If I was a monk there, I would think it's a trick question, but it's not. He said that the leaves in his hands were less than those in the forest. So then he went on to say that whatever he thought was the essential for a happier and peaceful life, and whatever this rest in the forest, there's so much to know in this world, but that's not essential. So that ties into what we do, which is to put in essential stories rather than churning content for the sake of churning content, and to just like give people what's essential in day-to-day life. Yeah, so that's a principle. Handful of Leaves.
Can I add on to that? So I've put the link of the sutta in the Zoom chat. And if you take a look at the sutta, actually, it's a lot deeper. So whatever we are saying in this podcast, like oversimplification, right? Then what is essential in life? It's the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha taught about the origination. So stress, we have to recognize, just like Nicole recognizing that your friend is going through a difficult time, and then knowing that there is an origin, there's a cause for it, and then knowing, what is the cause, and then what are the solutions, finding the way out. So when we are exploring different things in life, like whether should we chase after material success or chase after fame, etc., does it actually help us to transcend stress and suffering? If it does, then it is essential. You can achieve material wealth while, chasing after your own spiritual happiness also. But if it causes more stress, then you kind of know that you're in the wrong direction. So I think it really helps acts as a filter to ask the essential questions in life. And we are also trying on our website to do that, but in a more day-to-day, mundane kind of way. Yeah, go and check out the sutta.
Yes, go check it out. The link is in the chat. There's another follow-up question from YouTube. Has embarking on this journey, handful of leaves, somehow changed you or your perspective in any way? How have you changed?
I would say it's a growth journey. There's a lot of shift in perspective. Actually, we're creating something that it's not so much to serve our own needs, but to see if we can serve the needs of others. So to me, it feels very uncomfortable because I can't use myself as like a litmus test, right? To say, oh, will I read it? Will I not? Because I'm not the user. So I guess the shift is in perspective of trying to put myself in other shoes and also trusting in the data because I cannot trust my intuition too fully now. And just challenging my own views and being very uncomfortable and seeing how things unfold. It's a very nerve-wracking process at times.
Yeah, I fully agree with Kai-Sing. So for those who are joining us here today, what's interesting is that we are not the consumer of handful of leaves like content. Like because handful of leaves really meant for those who are trying to start their journey and we don't have a lot of these questions. But for us, we are like already like quite along the path. So we're just like always thinking back, like if we started like 10 years ago on this path, what was something that would have helped us a lot? And that would be handful of leaves. And so that's why we did this. But in terms of what has changed, I think for me it's like just being comfortable with failure. Fail fast, learn fast, and that's how we kind of keep trying to apply that to the way that we think and do things. I think perspective that has changed is also like, wow, I really admire content creators out there because it's so hard to like get good content out, make sure that it's edited, and definitely like, check out make sure you don't have double spacing, all of that kind of like small things that for me, I'm actually not, I'm a structured person because I'm not meticulous. And that's the part that always eats me up. Like when someone say, hey, the hyperlink, like one word got a spacing, then I'm like, I have to go and correct it. So I think like for me, just growing in that sense and learning how to also manage writers, manage contributors, manage content. That's how I've grown, through this like whole HOL process. Yeah, a good question.
A nice question, Grace. Could you say a bit more about how you, or give us some examples, right, of how you lean into this discomfort? Because it seems like you're doing a lot of things that, doesn't come naturally to you. I mean, both Kai-Sing and Heng.
I would say the Buddhist practice would come in very handy. So it's just to realize that, I mean, first it's a self-discovery, right? To realize that this discomfort is not mine. Am I clinging on to the identity, to this ego and to this certainty? And what can I learn from this discomfort? So for me, I'm leaning into the discomfort by looking at it as a growth process and an opportunity rather than like, oh, I don't really want to touch it. Let's avoid the subject altogether. And I think to some extent, I've also learned a lot because so for background, I run a service business for the past 7 years, and the result is so direct, right? I submit a deliverable or I complete a project and then I get paid and then I get feedback, etc. It's very direct. But here you're kind of putting things in the universe and you might be touching lives, but people might not necessarily give you that feedback. And then you're just like, not so sure whether you're on the right track, whether you're really doing the right thing. And I can be impatient sometimes, even though I try to be patient. So I guess it's to really see it as, what does this say about myself? And then how can I use this for spiritual growth? And also maybe translate it to the business in my my full-time job. Yes.
So what did it say about you?
that I can be very impatient. And also I like certainty. I mean, who doesn't, right? I used to have like 5-year roadmap, 10-year roadmap, and I would chart milestones. And if I don't get there, I would really beat myself up. But I have seen that change along the way. And to tell myself that it's not so much about the output. I can get there fast, but am I happy? Am I still serving that purpose of being more peaceful, free from stress? Or am I going in the opposite direction? So it's about having that as a North Star.
Can you say a little bit about how you came to realize that there was a shift, right? From having 5-10-year strategic plans, roadmaps, to something a bit different. Can you tell me about how you, what was going on through your mind as you were struggling with this, as you were, shifting your approach?
Wow, it's a very long story. I will try to synthesize it. So the common themes that go through my mind is self-doubt, like, oh, I'm such a loser. I can't, I can't really execute what I said I want to. And I probably wouldn't make it. Maybe those people who doubted me, they are right. And these themes come out quite a lot in my retreats and in my meditation, because with material goals, I also have spiritual goals. And I think the interesting part is, if you have goals for spirituality, you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment, because there's a sense of desire and it might not come from a very wholesome place. And it took me a long while, and also with the guidance of great teachers, to realize that, to say, what's the rush? Like, where are you going? What's more important? And also realize myself, like having like breakdowns and stuff. And I was like, where is this all coming from? And then just having that moment to say, okay, if I have capacity now to reflect and look inward, why am I feeling this? And what are some things I can control, and what are some things I can't control? And then just do what I can control and let everything take chance. I just go with the chance, and what I can, that's by choice. Yeah. My thoughts a bit scattered now. Maybe I would think about this. Yeah, thrown a little bit off guard.
Yeah, it's okay. I heard someone say, or maybe it's just me dreaming it up and I'm the one saying it myself, that there is no destination, right? It's all journey. It's journey all the way.
Yeah, actually reminded me of this quote. Like, I might not be where I want to be, but I am now where I need to, but I've gone where I need to go. Somewhere along those lines. So it's about, I think it's really just trusting the process. So to add on a little bit, I think where I come to that point of realization is, ever since young, whatever plans that I've set up for my own, and I was very determined at the start, I come to realize that I actually don't follow through, but it was a blessing in disguise. So I wanted to go to JC. I didn't get the marks to go to JC. I went to Poly. I didn't want to study business, but it ended up becoming the thing that I studied. I wanted to go to uni, but I ended up not going to uni, and I started a business. And it's kind of like the best thing that has ever happened to me, right? And I never knew that I was going to be a Buddhist until Shen turned up and I became a Buddhist. So it's just, all these blessings and things coming to fruition, and I don't regret any part of it.
Yeah, and certainly from the outside looking in, what you're doing is meaningful. You appear very successful, So maybe the only one who's beating yourself up is you. Yeah. So now on to Heng Xuan, right? So the question was, how have you changed? How has the journey changed you?
So I think overall, like this whole journey has taught me a lot about running a so-called an organization. I think this has taught me way more than I will ever get in my day-to-day corporate job. And in my day-to-day corporate job, funny enough, I'm the one consulting and advising businesses how to run better. And right now I'm in a case whereby, wow, there's so much to do. So I think I just have a greater sense of humility in a sense that I don't have it all. And I think number two, the thing that has changed for me is being okay to fail. I think like for me, I've grown up in an environment whereby if I'm a person that I put a lot of effort and trust into something, and I most of the time succeed, like in getting the goal that I want. And this has taught me to kind of slow down, and not everything is about metrics and numbers. So I think that has really changed for me. And I think to just pipe in on like the discomfort, right? How do we lean in on discomfort? And I think what helps for me is to recognize that a lot of the great people out there also had moments of pain, disappointment, setback. Even the Buddha himself, when he was, for those of you who don't read a lot into the full like length of his story, because it can be quite long lah. But one point of time, actually, in a sutta called the Kosambi Sutta, one of the person actually took away like his entire ministry. Like only like 2 disciples remained, and there was this person who was trying to so-called convert a lot of people. His name's Devadatta. Converted a lot of people to his ministry by promising that he was more strict than the Buddha, and because more strict equals good, a kind of like mentality. And the Buddha essentially had a major setback, right, in his ministry, and that actually brought a lot of like sameness with the Buddha, because the Buddha was a human being. And like him, we are human, we have setbacks. And that's how I lean with discomfort, knowing that the great people had their own setbacks, and they bounce back. And you're not special, so therefore you are like them, and therefore you can bounce back. Yeah.
You're not special. Could you say a little bit more about that? Like, it sounds like there's a bit more to that, that we might want to unpack.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question, right? You're not special. Because most of the time when we grow up as kids, we always talk about our parents that we're very special. And that creates a sense of like entitlement, a sense of like me, and yeah, then like that makes you feel like the world owes you something because you have this special right to exist. And when I use the word "you're not special," it is to instill a sense of not hopelessness, but actually humility. Yeah. And that brings you on the same level as everyone else who experiences happiness and suffering. So when you say you're not special, then and you're not special, and therefore you are capable of feeling pain and happiness. Yeah. Don't become Superman, and then you're like, oh, I'm Superman, I can never break. And then when you break down, you really break down really hard because you thought you're special all along. Yeah.
It sounds a bit, so I agree with everything you said, but maybe let me just give voice, right, to maybe there's a bit of apparent paradox here, right? Like, to be able to do something, you talked about extraordinary wisdom, right? People may run away with the thought that, oh, you need to be special to do something worth doing, meaningful, right? If you're ordinary, then, don't bother trying, But in fact, what you're saying is the opposite, that kind of like the more humble you are, the more ordinary you believe you are, somehow that takes you further down the path. What's going on here?
It's a very, very, very good question on how like ordinariness can bring us to greatness. I think how that happens in many of times you study the great people, like so-called great people, in a sense that everyone like looks up to or say they are worth modeling after, is that because they had humility, it gave them perspective. It gave them perspective to think of what the needs of the people are or their causes are, rather than what they want to achieve by being on the pedestal. So that actually brought them the ability to see further than other people. And I would say like, yeah, we are not special because we are just borrowing this knowledge and experiences from other people that we have met. And because we are borrowing them, then let's make the best use of it. Just like how you borrow something from a friend and you want to make them proud, and then you just do it well. But the moment you see these skills and abilities as yourself, then there's a lot of like achievements that come into it, and that makes you special, but in a sense that it shortens your vision to be smaller than it could ever be. Yeah.
Sounds like both Heng Xuan and Kai Xing, this journey has helped you redefine what it means to be successful.
Accurate.
I
So
want to. Oh, go ahead.
So I saw that Yoshan had a question on
Yeah. Yep. My question is just like any quote or like motto that you guys live by. It can be from the Buddhist teaching, can be not. Just to share with everyone here. Yeah.
Kai Xing, do you have any?
I saw a sutra, right? I mean, I have a lot of quotes, and so many sutras that I like. One that I often quote is this. It's called Patota. I can't pronounce it properly, but I'll put it in the chat. It's called the goat stick, and it tells the Buddha gave an analogy of 4 thoroughbreds, or you can say like horses, right? And there are 4 types of horses. The first type is when the horse would see the shadow of the owner and say, okay, it's time to go. And then the second type of horse would see that, okay, there's a shadow, the owner is coming, but the owner would have to like tap on the horse, then the horse would be ready to move. And then the third one is shadow not enough, tap also not enough, must prick a little bit, then the horse would move. And the last one must be like prick really hard, then would move. And the Buddha used this analogy to describe 4 types of people. And it can sound very morbid, but basically it's about listening or knowing about the death of people, right? Like sometimes, you see news article, oh, got this flood or this very bad incident and people die because of that. Then it's like, oh, so sad. And it might cause you to reflect on life. And it's so many degree away from you, but you'll say, oh, what is my priorities in life? And what's more important? Then you'll do something about it. But some people, okay, listen to the news, but it's somebody else's business, right? So it will only take maybe your relatives kind of passing away for you to start thinking about what's important. Then the third type is it has to be your circle or family, like someone really, really close passed away. Then you'll start reflecting. And then the last one is on yourself. Like maybe you have like very severe illness or cancer and stuff like that, then it gives you a different perspective. And why I really like this sutta is because I feel like contemplation of death, it's so important to really help me understand what is truly purposeful and meaningful. Like if I were to die next moment, like this is the last time you ever hear me speak, right? Then have I lived a life that I'm happy about? And have I done anything to people whom I should apologize and like make amends, etc.? So I think it's really like out of the 1,000 things I want to achieve, right? It helps me to scope it down and to really not be so complacent. And time itself, it's finite, right? So yeah, make every breath, every moment count. So that's like my favorite sutta as a personal reminder.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Very cool.
Thanks, Kai Xing. For me, is the Simsapa Sutta is one of my favorite ones, therefore a handful of leaves. But I think another one more like relatable for us as well is this quote by Confucius. Every man has 2 lives. The second one starts when he realizes that he has just one. And I think that always brings me perspective that, yeah, we all have 2 lives, and we climb the first mountain in our life. But the moment that we realize there's a second mountain to climb, then we understand life a bit more deeper. Yeah. So I always think that to remind myself, like life is not just work, life is not just fulfilling your responsibilities, but it's about, doing something deeper and something more meaningful and to find joy in that doing. Yeah. But great question.
Nice.
Oops. Nice. Thanks so much.
Kai Xing and Heng Xuan, is there anything that you want to share about Handful of Leaves, tell the audience?
We have a podcast coming up, and basically we'll be covering topics that relate to our very mundane worries, right? Like, how do I deal with toxic work culture? How do I deal with relationship? Or if I have a partner who's in a different religion, how can I make it work? So we're kind of thinking in line along these topics, and to also touch on maybe some of the taboo subjects that are not often talked about in a bigger setting because it's so contentious, and just like hearing a different perspective. So our very first episode that we have already recorded is with Tan Chet Ming. So he's the best-selling author of the Search Inside Yourself book. You might have heard of him, and he's like started this whole Google mindfulness course, right? And the topic, like mentioned earlier on, it's about balancing contentment as well as ambition. The upcoming podcast would be on the topic of when will being good be a bad thing? It's like, oh, we always talk about, oh, we must be a good person. But to what extent would that actually hinder our spiritual progress? And how do we even define good and bad? And we also have, through the community, people were asking about finance, Buddhism and personal finance. I think quite relevant to what Gerald spoke about, right? Should we not chase after material wealth? And about social media, how do we use social media to grow spiritually? This kind of thing where it seems like they don't sit very well together, and there's a dichotomy, and how do we make it work? So we would invite guest speakers to share, and we are still exploring the format. We might also have like chit chat sessions. So that's something that is fresh and new. And Shen is also trying out like a new format. Maybe you want to share about it, the article.
Yeah, so we also just launched this thing called Wholesome Wednesdays. We launch our articles every Friday, but we also have now experimenting with this thing called Wholesome Wednesdays, where we curate positive stuff on the internet from TikTok. You imagine like I can never imagine myself using TikTok, but yes, TikTok, YouTube, talks on Spotify, and we just curate them for like the week. And these are like two important stuff, or we felt that was important or that inspire us for that week to get over the Wednesday hump day. Hump day is Wednesday, so like when everything energy drops, then we come in to show that you can be positive while going through hump day. Yeah, so that's also on our website, and we push notifications through Telegram and also Facebook, Instagram, and we also have the podcast waitlist, which I just posted in the chat. So for those who are keen, you can hear Kai Xing's really like soothing voice, and then she'll do the podcast. I unfortunately do not have that special ability. Yeah. So thanks.
Yeah, I agree. It's Kai Xing's voice is very soothing indeed. You mentioned that TikTok is something that you could never see yourself using before, and if I remember correctly, Kai Xing also mentioned that she kind of got off social media for a long time, and she's having to find her way back into it again. Can you share with us some stories about the ups and downs of growing a community, of reaching out to people en masse, right? Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, or Telegram groups, or whatever, that could give all of us something to think about.
I think overall, like managing communities on that ups and downs, I think the downs are just sometimes you post something you thought would engage people, but no one reply. Yeah, so that is like the downs. But I think the ups is when people reach out to you through any of these social media platform, and they follow you because it helps them through their day. So I think that's the ups, like the tangible ups that you are touching people's lives. And part of the learning process is like learning TikTok lah. I think that was like such a difficult journey, because I it's like a Gen Z thing, and then like I was like, do I really need to do a dance? And no, and for your info, I do not do dance on like TikTok. But and also like learning Instagram Reels, which is a whole new rollout, a whole new way of like distributing content. So I think that has been the ups and downs. The downs is like, wow, I post this, I spend so much time making this Instagram Reels. or like doing this TikTok thing. Lucky I never do a dance, and then you're like, yeah, no one watches it. Yeah, so I think it's that just that journey. Yeah, Kai Sing?
I am still struggling to find my way back to social media. You can see it's very like it's very choppy. Like some days you'll see me around, and some days like I'm just I didn't even post this on my own personal social media. In terms of challenge, I would say it's because I'm so foreign to these platforms, and there was a period where I have to cover our co-founder to manage Instagram, and I would say it was really tough learning that like the algorithms and how it works. Like every other week they would change some feature, and I could never understand like why people use Instagram. But I would say along the way I realized that being a hermit is not good because I can be stuck in my own world. And as I was scrolling through my own personal Instagram account, which has been dormant since 2013, I realized, wow, all these connections that I've made in Polytechnic, like it's just nice to see how their life have turned out. And I kind of feel connected, even though I don't get in touch with them. It's like passive connection. However, it's still good to kind of know that these people are out there. Not to say that they are doing fine, because people usually would post only the good stuff on social media. But I guess it's just to constantly have them at the back of my mind. And when I have the capacity, I can reach out to them when I want to, rather than out of sight, out of mind, that I don't really know what's going on in the world. So I am still finding it a challenge. Not so sure if you guys have any tips for me to get back, or whether I should even go back on social media.
Well, for me, I find it a huge challenge as well. And, as you're talking about, the struggles that you face, I mean, not just in social media, right? Just with planning and with kind of doing something a bit different. It just resonated so much with me. Because I also I don't want Facebook, I don't want Instagram, I don't want all of this, and yet I'm doing this. So I guess that connects with what Heng Xuan said about like the second part of your life. Maybe it's not exactly what you're saying, but like the second part of my life is doing all the things I didn't do in the first part of my life. Doing the exact opposite of what I used to do. I'll get to my answer in a bit, but like one thing I noticed is that like you're a communication coach, right? Like you run a communication business, and the defining technology of this time is actually social media. And at the heart of it, I mean, defining doesn't mean it's good necessarily. I'm just saying that it's changed so many of our lives, right? For better or for worse. And I guess social media can be about clickbait, can be about views, or it can be an amplifier, to get your message out there. So if at the end of the day, it's just about communication, then why not, right? If you think it's about wasting time, you think it's about, as I mentioned, all these unproductive, unnutritious types of content, then you're just kind of going with the crowd, but you may not be fully seeing the power of this tool, right? So it's just on me to try it out. I mean, I love to write long form, but now I'm kind of forcing myself to like squeeze my thoughts into a phrase, and that's very, very painful. But I think like meditation, I think any other skill, just do it and get better at it. Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us today on this chat, on this stranger conversation with Kai Sing and Heng Xuan from A Handful of Leaves. It's lovely to see everyone here. I loved all your questions. We have posted the links to the Handful of Leaves website, Telegram group, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All the ways you can get in touch with them in our chat. And if you'd like to follow Stranger Conversations, just hop over to Instagram. That's all you can handle right now on Stranger Convos, right? That's our account name. So once again, thank you so much. It was amazing chat. Thank you so much for spending a Saturday morning with us. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having. Thanks everyone. Wishing everyone great weekend. See you.
Thank you.
Joshan and Sean.
Thank you.